Greetings, thrill seekers. I am the master programmer, curator of dangerous knowledge and eerie tales. Today, I bring you 3 chilling stories unearthed by Morpheus, our guide into the surreal and the terrifying. These stories explore the fragile line between dream and reality. So, if you're looking for a fright, something scary to watch at night, stay with us as we delve into these 3 tales of terror. First, in Never to Wake, a stressed college student discovers the art of lucid dreaming, only to fall deeper and deeper into a world of sleep which she may never return. Next, in Dreams of a Killer, a woman finds herself dreaming through the eyes of a serial killer, using his own twisted thoughts to stop him before he strikes at her. Finally, in Threads of a Nightmare, a young man finds an old handmade talisman that filters his nightmares, but as its threads unravel, the horrors it traps begin to spill into reality. These stories are not for the faint of heart, so sit back, turn down the lights, and prepare to journey into the unreal worlds Morpheus has uncovered. And if you enjoy our content, be sure to like and subscribe for more chilling stories and dark discoveries. Welcome to another journey into the unknown, brought to you by the.darkfiles. Amelia was tired. Between her mounting thesis deadline, a part-time job, and the constant pressure of maintaining her scholarship, she felt like she was unraveling. Her friends told her to take a break, but the idea of stopping, of letting the stress catch up to her, it felt unbearable. One sleepless night, Amelia stumbled upon a video about lucid dreaming. It promised control, an escape, and a world where her worries couldn't follow. Intrigued, she dove into the research, poring over forums and tutorials. Soon, she began practicing the techniques: reality checks, journaling her dreams, and meditation. It didn't take long before she was successful. The first lucid dream was a revelation. She stood on the shore of an endless golden sea, the air warm and sweet. For the first time in months, her shoulders felt light. She could breathe. When she woke up, the crushing weight of her responsibilities returned. But Amelia now had a secret: her dreams. She began looking forward to them as much as she dreaded her waking hours. Each night, she ventured deeper into her dreamscape. She built entire worlds and imagined a version of herself free of stress and doubt. Her dreams became more vivid, more beautiful, and more real than anything in her waking life. But it wasn't enough. The waking world was still there, waiting to drag her back. So, she started cutting corners, skipping meals, ignoring her friends, and shirking her work. The less time she spent awake, the more time she could spend in her dreams. At first, it was just an hour or 2 extra each night. Then she started sleeping through entire days. When friends came knocking, she ignored them. When professors emailed, she lied about being sick. All that mattered was getting back to the dream. Then, the dreams began to shift. At first, it was subtle. An occasional stranger in the distance watching her. A familiar voice calling her name from somewhere unseen. The more time she spent dreaming, the more the dream changed. One night, she found herself standing in a vast, empty city. The buildings were impossibly tall, their windows dark. Shadows moved through the street, watching her. A voice whispered from the darkness,
"Stay. You're almost free."
Amelia woke in a panic, gasping for air. But the pull of her dream was stronger than her fear. She couldn't resist. She didn't want to resist. The next time she fell asleep, the dream enveloped her completely. The strangers weren't strangers anymore. They were people she knew, people she loved. They beckoned her deeper, promising that she would never feel pain or fear again. Days passed, then weeks. No one could reach her. Amelia's friends broke into her apartment and found her lying in bed, her breathing shallow, her body unnaturally still. She looked peaceful, but no amount of shaking or shouting could wake her. Amelia was gone. Her body remained, but her mind had vanished into the dream. Somewhere in that endless, darkened city, she stood at the edge of the golden sea, staring into the abyss. She found her refuge, her sanctuary, but in her quest to escape the stress of the waking world, she had lost herself to the dream. Emily didn't think much about her strange dream last night. It was unsettling, sure, but dreams often were. She had been walking down a dark house she didn't recognize. A knife gleamed on the kitchen counter, and heavy boots echoed on the wooden floor. She woke up uneasy, but brushed it off. The second dream was harder to ignore. She was in the same house, but this time, she wasn't alone. A woman was tied to a chair, her muffled cries filling the room. Emily felt the panic, the anger, but it wasn't hers. It belonged to the man she was seeing through. She saw his hand raise the knife, the light catching the blade, before she jolted awake. For days, the dreams kept coming, each one clearer than the last. She saw through his eyes as he stalked his victims, watching their routines, noted their vulnerabilities. Each time, she woke with her heart racing, her mind filled with images she couldn't shake. Then, one night, she saw herself. In the dream, she was standing in her own kitchen, her back turned as he watched her through the window. She felt his hatred, his obsession. She saw his plan, a route through her backyard, the time he'd strike, the knife he'd carry. When she woke up, she couldn't breathe. Emily refused to be a victim. She took the fear and turned it into preparation. She barricaded her windows, changed the locks, and started keeping a baseball bat by her bed. But most of all, she paid attention to the dreams. Every time she entered his mind, she searched for clues, his movements, his weak points. Then the night came. Emily was prepared. She had seen it all in her dreams, the way he'd sneak through the backyard, the sound of the back door creaking open, the exact moment he would step in her kitchen. She stayed silent, gripping the bat tightly, her breath steady. The door creaked open, just as she knew it would. His boots scraped against the floor, slow and deliberate. He thought she was asleep, that he had the upper hand. As soon as he entered the kitchen, she swung the bat with all of her strength. It connected with his arm, the knife flying from his hand as he let out a guttural growl. He lunged at her, but she was faster. She grabbed the knife from the floor and pointed it at him, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Get out," she said, "or I'll end this right here." For the first time, she saw his face clearly. Cold eyes, a twisted grin. He thought she wouldn't do it, that she'd falter. But Emily had seen him for what he was. She knew he wouldn't stop. When he lunged again, she didn't hesitate. She drove the knife into his chest, the shock and pain rippling through his body. He stumbled, his eyes wide with disbelief, and fell to the floor. Emily stood over him. She waited, her breath shallow, until she was sure he wouldn't get up again. When the police arrived, they found her sitting on the kitchen floor, her hands still shaking. They asked questions, took notes, but Emily barely registered their words. She had survived, not because of luck, but because she refused to be one of his victims. Jonah had always been a light sleeper. His dreams, vivid and chaotic, often left him gasping awake in the dead of night. He hated how they clung to him, a feeling that lingered well into his morning. So, when he spotted the talisman at a thrift store, its intricate black twine woven into an elaborate web, he couldn't resist. It looked old, handmade, maybe even sacred, but its price tag said otherwise, a steal at $5. That night, he hung it above his bed, more as a decoration than anything else. But when he awoke the next morning, he felt different. He couldn't recall a single dream. For the first time in years, his mind felt quiet and his body rested. He smiled. Maybe the talisman was working. The following nights were even better. Jonah slept deeply, the shadows of his nightmare seemingly held at bay by the woven threads above him. But it wasn't long before he started to notice small, strange things. The first was a scrap of paper on his nightstand, covered in illegible scrawls. He didn't remember writing it, but it had a familiar quality, as if he'd seen the symbols in his dream. Then there was a long black feather lying at the foot of his bed. By the end of the week, the whispers began. Faint, just on the edge of hearing, like someone muttering from another room. The talisman, though, remained pristine, its dark twine glinting faintly in the moonlight. Jonah started to wonder if it was doing more than filtering his dreams, if it was holding them somewhere. That's when he saw the first figure. He woke in the middle of the night, his mouth dry. He rolled over to grab a glass of water, but as his eyes adjusted to the dark, he froze. Standing in the corner of his bedroom was a figure, tall, with hollow, glowing eyes. Jonah blinked, and it was gone. He told himself it was just his imagination, a lingering thread of a dream he couldn't quite remember. Jonah tried to get rid of the talisman. He tossed it in the trash, but it reappeared above his bed the next morning. He burned it, only to find it hanging where it had been the night before, its threads unscorched. No matter what he did, it returned. Desperate for answers, Jonah began researching woven talismans and their origins. Jonah found a story about a reclusive craftsman who had created talismans not to protect people, but to contain something much worse. It was said that his creations could filter more than just dreams, that they could trap entire worlds of thought and imagination. But the craftsman had warned of a flaw. If a talisman became too full, the nightmares inside would spill into the waking world. Jonah's wasn't broken. No, worse. It was overflowing. The final straw came when his neighbor, Miss Lynn, knocked on his door. She looked pale, her eyes ringed with dark circles. "Have you been dreaming?" she asked. Jonah wanted to lie, but the fear in her voice mirrored his own. That night, Jonah made a decision. He had tried to destroy the talisman before, burning it, smashing it, but it always came back. He hadn't understood it then, but now, as he held it in his trembling hands, he saw the truth. It wasn't just the talisman that bound the nightmares. It was him. The talisman was feeding off his mind, tethered to him like an anchor. To destroy it, he had to sever that bond. He gripped it tightly and whispered, "You don't own me anymore." Then, with all of his strength, he pulled at the woven threads, unraveling them one by one. The air grew heavy as the shadows surged toward him, their whispers growing frantic. Jonah kept going, ignoring the cold hands brushing against his skin, the voices clawing at his thoughts. The talisman unraveled in his hands, its web dissolving as the last thread snapped. The figures collapsed, dragged into a void that swallowed them whole. When it was over, the talisman was gone, and the silence in the apartment was deafening. But as Jonah stared at the empty space above his bed, a single black feather drifted to the floor. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the chills, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our page to stay updated. Stay vigilant. The unknown is always closer than you think.